Kishikwa, Karabara, Wachi, Kishikwa, Kwani.
It is a story at the heart of America. One richer and more surprising than we've been told. American Experience presents a story that spans 300 years and a vast continent.
The greatest thing a person can have is the power. Beneguzzi, it's scary.
It is a story of hope, courage, and survival.
We were about to be obliterated culturally. Our spiritual way of life, our entire way of life was about to be stamped out.
Every tribe in this country has a time of horror, absolute horror, when they were confronted by this invader.
What we did to the southeastern Indians, it's ethnic cleansing.
It was done to them, so they did it back. But better.
Whatever means and manner we could, since the Europeans arrived here, we've had to fight for our survival.
An epic history of America. Seen through native eyes. Too remarkable. Too inspiring to ever forget.
The Master of Life has appointed this place for us to light our fires. And here we shall remain.
Exclusive corporate funding for American Experience provided by Liberty Mutual. Major funding provided by the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation. Funding for We Shall Remain provided by the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Ford Foundation, the Arthur Vining Davis Foundations, Calliopeia Foundation, and by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and viewers like you. Thank you.
On a cold night in February 1973, a caravan rolled through the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. The cars were packed with 200 Indians, men and women, local Oglala Lakota, and members of the urban militant group, the American Indian Movement. They headed toward the hallowed ground of Wounded Knee, the site of the last massacre of the Indian Wars.
Going into Wounded Knee that night, when it was dark and scary, and we were clinging to our weapons tightly. It was a full moon, and we knew that a battle was going to come. I was sitting there thinking of some of these young men that are around me. Am I committing them to die?
I was ready to do whatever it takes for change. I didn't care. I had children, and for them, I figured I could make a stand here.
They were up to no good. I mean, why would they be traveling in a caravan with all these weapons and all these Molotov cocktails if they weren't going to engage in some kind of destructive activity?
By the 1970s, Native people, once masters of the continent, had become invisible, consigned to the margins of American life. Their anger and frustration would explode in Wounded Knee.
We were about to be obliterated culturally. Our spiritual way of life, our entire way of life was about to be stamped out. And this was a rebirth of our dignity and self-pride.
For the next 71 days, Indian protesters at Wounded Knee would hold off the federal government at gunpoint. Media from around the world would give the siege day-by-day coverage, and Native Americans from across the nation would come to Wounded Knee to be part of what they hoped would be a new beginning.
The message that went out is that a band of Indians could take on this government. Tecumseh had his day, and Geronimo, Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, and we had ours.
We have tonight one of the strangest stories to come along in a long time. A group of American Indians has taken over the town of Wounded Knee in South Dakota, and they have been holding it for nearly a whole day. This afternoon, the FBI said the Indians are in charge of the town.
We had just finished eating our dinner, and so I looked out the window and I said, well, for heaven's sake, who opened the store? And they're carrying things out, bringing things out by the carload. And I was floored, just floored.
After stripping bare the Wounded Knee trading post, the village's only store, the protesters took over a local church, holding the minister and other white residents hostage. They quickly blocked all roads leading into town.
On Tuesday, February 27th, I received a telephone call from some news outlet. I was told that the caravan forcibly took over the village, were holding hostages and causing destruction there. So I immediately got my agents together and I proceeded to the main entrance to Wounded Knee.
We saw a Fed car coming, and then it kind of came, drove just right up, kind of not too far off. So when they come on, they got out of their car, they went looking around, and as soon as they put the glasses up, we opened up on them. Let them know we're here, and that's far enough.
I called inside Wounded Knee, and I said, look, let's get together and have a meeting so we can stop the potential for bloodshed here. Let's talk about this. As I walked up to them, I see all these rifles pointed at me, and it gives you an uneasy feeling.
Yes, sir. Joseph Trimbach with the FBI.
Trimbach came to that roadblock, and you could tell he'd been up all night, and he's very irritable.
And we have law enforcement back here that's armed, and we have hostages here.
I have no idea what's going to happen next. They came out and gave me this list of demands.
The protesters called for a federal investigation of corruption on reservations in South Dakota and immediate Senate hearings on broken treaties with Indian nations.
The headquarters of the Sioux people.
We're angry about losing our land, losing our language, being ripped off of our ability to live as Indian people. Our parents was telling us, you have to walk the white man road. Indian ways are going to be gone. Be a Christian. You know, go to school and learn that English, but don't learn your own language. We wanted to give our lives in such a way that would bring attention to what was happening in Indian country, and we were pretty sure that we were going to have to give our lives.
The protesters demanded one change close to home. Through a translator, the Lakota chief Fool's Crow called for the immediate ouster of Dick Wilson, the elected head of the tribal government there on Pine Ridge.
Wilson molested the Indians, sometimes threatening them and so forth. Before the sun set, we want him out of office, and there will be no trouble.
My initial reaction was, this is something way beyond my pay grade, Someone in Washington is going to have to handle this.
Not good.
The standoff was unfolding on the Pine Ridge Reservation, home to the Oglala Lakota, not far from where chiefs like Red Cloud, Sitting Bull, and Crazy Horse had once led their people into battle.
The Lakota, who Americans call the Sioux, are iconic in American history and the American imagination. These are buffalo hunters who lived in teepees, who were at the battle with General Custer. Nearly everything about the Lakota life is firmly implanted in the way that Americans think about Indians.
By 1973, the Lakota way of life on the plains was largely in the past. The Oglala Sioux tribal government ran things on Pine Ridge. And where traditional chiefs had once sought consensus, elected Chairman Dick Wilson ruled with an iron hand.
He was like a Chicago ward boss from the 1930s. Big flour sack of a guy, wore dark glasses inside and out, was fond of drinking, and brought all his friends and family and cronies into office with him, gave them jobs on the federal payroll.
On the Pine Ridge Reservation, as with most reservations, the tribal chairman and the council have a great deal of power to spread money around, to spread food around, or to withhold it, or to favor one part of the reservation over another, which is what was happening.
Wilson favored mixed-race, assimilated Indians like himself, and slighted the traditional Sioux who spoke their language, practiced their religion, and remained loyal to the traditional Oglala chiefs.
Do you get any help from the tribal council?
No. Dick Wilson's the president here. He's the worst one, I think. He's the, I don't know, he gets the most favorite thing.
The federal census, I think every decade through the mid to end of the 20th century, showed Pine Ridge as the poorest jurisdiction in the United States. So there's poverty, and then there's reservation poverty.
When traditional Oglalas challenged corruption in tribal government, Dick Wilson responded with force.
He had his own army, which intimidated the full-bloods mostly, the traditional people. His goons started beating up the people, and no charges were ever pressed. And if they did, they got thrown out of court. He controlled the whole reservation.
Some of the officers hated to arrest any of Dick's people, in spite of the fact that they did break the law. He helped me a number of times, so I felt that I owed him a loyalty. And so I didn't support everything he did, but irregardless of what he did, I still felt that loyalty.
Well, there's been a lot of accusations made here lately, and one in particular that upsets me is the fact that I am using a goon squad, so to speak. They are respectable and honest citizens of Pine Ridge.
Well, we're all sharpshooters. I'm the goon squad. Come on, go and get them.
In late 1972, traditional Oglalas came together to push for Wilson's removal.
They started a civil rights commission, Oglala Sioux Civil Rights Commission. And from there, they got the documentation of the corruption, of the misuse of funds. They got the evidence.
And eventually the civil rights, they had a stack about 1.5 inches thick of all the testimony and violations, civil rights violations. Nobody ever got charged.
Prompted by the dissidents, the Tribal Council held impeachment hearings in February 1973. But Wilson intimidated witnesses, strong-armed council members, and managed to survive. Many Oglalas felt they had one last, desperate option.
We've always been peaceful and pretty much mind our own business and making our living and raising our family. Law-abiding. Well, I believe that the time has come that we have to commit violence in order to be heard. I don't want to see anybody killed or anything, but the time's going to come when violence might have to be committed in order to wake the people up.
By the second day of the siege, the spectacle of armed Indians holding a town and 11 hostages had put the U.S. government on full alert.
By this morning, the entire area was blocked off by police. There were roadblocks as far away as the Nebraska state line.
On the far rise is roadblock 1. We have further roadblocks around the perimeter, which encompasses approximately a 15-mile area.
The director said, tell Trimbach he can have anything he wants, which was pretty neat because that was like a blank check. So I had agents go up to Rapid City and buy every rifle that they could find in the city because we needed them like right now. So they came down and now we at least had rifles for protection instead of just silencers.
The military response is overwhelming. It involves plans using the U.S. Army to put down this rebellion. Clearly, there are people within the federal government who see a need to take it to the limit.
I was awakened. There was a deep, rumbling, droning noise. And we were looking around and we were surrounded by armored personnel carriers, APCs.
All of a sudden we saw these 2 fighter jets coming and they circled around. And from the south they just came right at us. We thought it was over. That's napalm. Dennis Banks pulled out his pistol and he started firing. Boom, 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 boom. Then they were gone. You know, it was that proverbial last act of defiance. You know, here's that little mouse, and here comes the big, huge eagle, and the little mouse is standing there like this.
On the afternoon of the second day, South Dakota Senators George McGovern and James Aberesk arrived. They hoped that if they could resolve the issue of the hostages, the crisis at Wounded Knee could be ended quickly.
When they came in, it was very newsworthy. They came in with the news media. That's how the networks got it. And they said, we want to see the hostages.
I thought it was a deterrent.
The agreement I'd had with Russell Means was that if we landed at Pine Ridge, he would release the hostages.
I have an indication through an intermediary that they will release part of the hostages.
And I said, well, where are the hostages? You're supposed to release them. You agreed to release them. So they're standing over there. So I went over and I said, you folks, we rescued you. You can leave now.
But not anywhere
If you
else.
wanted to leave the Wounded Knee area, could you go?
They're sitting there on pins and needles.
Ask